Pretty incredible, actually. We had roughly 170 registrations. So we thought, nah, we'll put out 270 seats. And if you have a look, we've probably got about 30 to go, which is fantastic. Welcome to everyone. I want to acknowledge that tonight we meet on Kaurna land, the traditional land of the people who looked after and cared for that land for thousands of years. Their relationship to the land was at the centre of their lives. And so today, we acknowledge them and in particular pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, for the stewardship that they've had of this land for ages. And then a few little notes. First of all, mobile phones. Would you like to check that you got them silent, switched off, or whatever, but not such that it will ring and disturb us? Secondly, toilets, if you need them, are basically in the passage around the back of me here. The emergency exits are signed, one down the back there, one straight through here, down the back and through here and out either side. Sadly, due to COVID, there's no refreshments going to be shared afterwards. If someone's desperate for a glass of water, see someone and we'll organise it for you, but we thought probably most people are used to this by now and have probably bought their own. Nevertheless, that's the way it'll be. Now, can you hear me back there? Okay, that's good. And back here? Okay, so sound check's fine, Russ. Talking about COVID, we are in a public assembly according to the way it's classified, which means masks are mandated unless you have I guess, a story that's genuine and you can tell us about it, but that's the way it is. Also afterwards, there will be almost certainly some time when you will want to touch base with Joe Blogs or even these blogs, and if that's the case, try to maintain the social distancing as much as you can. We do have a COVID marshal and we have a COVID plan, and our marshal's dressed up in his high-vis, so you'll see him coming. But we're doing that seriously because this is a big meeting, say 250 odd people. There is a strong chance that it could be someone here even without knowing that is infected with COVID. We don't really want this to be a supercharger, so do your best. The Blackwood Business Network, represented tonight by their president, Jane Silverison, behind me, are co-hosting this event with the Blackwood Uniting Church, and I welcome her now to this position.
Lovely, thanks. Thank you, Peter. So I'd just like to welcome everyone to the Meet the Candidates Forum for Waite this evening, and we'd also like to extend a special thank you to Associate Professor Benito Cao from the University of Adelaide for moderating the forum tonight. We'd also like to thank all members of the public for giving up their evening to attend this forum this evening. And also just to remind everyone that this event will be live streamed and available subsequently on YouTube. And now I'd just like to pass you over to Benito to open the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Meet the Waite Candidates 2022 Public Forum, co-hosted by Blackwood Uniting Church and Blackwood Business Network. My name, as has been said, is Benito Cao. I'm Associate Professor in Politics and International Relations at the University of Adelaide, and I will be the moderator of tonight's forum. Before we hear from the candidates, let me explain the structure of the event and the basic rules of engagement. These rules are important for all of us to make the most of this event and to be as fair as possible to all the candidates. So the structure of the forum is as follows. Once I finish with this introduction, each candidate will have 4 minutes to make an opening statement. There will be a gentle warning bell at the 3-minute mark. It's this nice little one, to give time for the candidates to wrap up their opening statement. The bell will ring vigorously if they're still going after the 4 minutes have concluded, and that will be my nuclear option, which is this one. The order of introductions has been decided by a draw that took place earlier. So just as a reminder, the order of introductions of the opening statements will be as follows. Katherine Hutcherson for Labour, Alexander Hyde for Liberal, Heather Holmes Ross, Independent, Sam Dullock, Independent, and Brendan White, Greens. Note that there will be no questions allowed between opening statements. If questions arise from the opening statements, please write them down or take a mental note and ask them during the open Q&A a little bit later in the evening. Following the opening statements from the 5 candidates, I will pose 3 questions on behalf of the host organizations. All 5 candidates will have the opportunity to answer these questions. The answers to these questions and to subsequent questions from the floor should be brief, no more than 1 minute per candidate per question. And once again, the bell will ring if and when required. Once the set questions have been answered, we will have approximately 50 minutes to ask questions from the floor. And the rules of engagement for this part of the forum are simple but important, and there are essentially 3 main rules. Now, first of all, this is an opportunity to find out what the different candidates propose to address the concerns of the residents of Waite, not to make statements or speeches in support or against any of the candidates or their respective parties. So please formulate direct questions, and if the question requires or needs a small preamble, make that preamble as short as possible. In the same way that I will have to cut short interventions from candidates that go beyond the agreed minutes, if preambles go on and on, I will have to intervene and cut you short. I will also intervene if a question is clearly inappropriate. Second rule, you can direct your questions to one or several of the candidates. But since this is an opportunity to find out what the different candidates propose to address the concerns of the residents of Waite, when the question permits, every candidate will be given the opportunity to address the question, even if that question was directed only to a specific candidate or candidates. And finally, since this is an event organized by and for the residents of Waite, questions will be accepted only from those in this electorate. So please, before you ask your question, state your name and suburb, and then ask the question. Once we run out of questions or run out of time, that time being approximately 8:50 p.m., the candidates will have 1 minute each to make a closing statement, and the closing statements will bring the forum to an end, but you're welcome to talk individually to candidates until around 9:30 p.m. So it's now time to hear the opening statements from the 5 candidates. First up, Katherine Hutcherson, Labour.
Thank you. Thank you, Benito, Jane, and Peter. And thank you, everybody, for coming along tonight. It's so great to see so many of our community here and some familiar faces. And thank you for wanting to come along and learn a little bit more about the candidates. If I haven't already met you, please come and say hello before you leave, because it's really important to me that I know as many people as possible. I'd like to take a little minute to reflect on what's happening in Queensland, and I know that we're all worried about the people that are missing and have already unfortunately perished, and also in Ukraine. And of course in Ukraine they're facing such heartache as they battle to protect their country. We are a lucky country in Australia, however, because we have the right to vote freely and take part in a process just like this one. None of the parties or candidates tonight here will decide who forms government. That's up to you. So I really appreciate you coming along and giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about me and why we need a Malinowskis government. I'm not sure there's any other electorate that has quite the level of engagement in politics like Waite. It has been refreshing to knock on doors and to already have people acknowledge that they know a little bit about me, but I want to know a little bit about you, and so it's important to me that we can engage. I know. I was born in Blackwood Hospital to a 4th generation Australian father and my mother who immigrated from India when she was 19. I grew up in Glenouta and went to a Balear primary school. And whilst that was a really long time ago, while I've been knocking on doors, it's nice to see so many of my friends and their parents still living in the electorate. I think it's what makes our community so special, and it's such a wonderful place to live that people rarely leave it, or if they do, they invariably come back and raise their families here. Our proximity to nature allows us such privilege, and those like-minded people that move here also share our care and for the environment. Having lived in the electorate for for all but 2 years of my life, our community means a lot to me. I now live in Upper Sturt with my 18-year-old son, Finn. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and I can 100% agree with that, having lost my husband when my son was 4. And I'm lucky most of my family live in the electorate, but I also acknowledge that our community members and my friends and neighbours all helped bring him up to be the man he is today. I'm in Upper Sturt. I'm a member of the CFS and also the the Soldiers Memorial Hall. I love being in the CFS. I think it's such a special part of our community, and we have such a beautiful family. And I acknowledge all the volunteers in Waite, including the SES, their families and the sacrifices that they make, answering the call in the middle of the night, when it's pouring rain, in the blazing sun. They all help to protect our community, and that's something special. And it's one of the reasons I'm running, is to advocate for better funding for all of our volunteers. I spent 10 years working in the hospitality industry as a chef, and I understand what it's like to be a frontline worker. I've also worked at Bank SA, and I currently am an industrial advocate, and I stand up for our bankers. They've been on the front line during COVID, and I've worked hard to ensure their employers have protected them, but also provided support for those that want to make different choices. I feel that I've always been a person who's willing to help others, and it's really important to me that we have more women in Parliament, because I think that can only lead to good outcomes. So I stand here today proud to be putting up my hand again for the seat of Waite for the Labor Party, and I'm especially proud of the policies that we are bringing to the election. Our commitment to health is unprecedented, and we can make these fully costed commitments because we won't be building a basketball stadium on our parklands that was recently passed by Adelaide City Council. For our seat of Waite, community members tell me they're wanting something new. They feel that our electorate has been ignored and the vote taken for granted. When I look around our electorate, and we need a fresh perspective. Labor is moving forward, and I want to take you and our community with them. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Benito, and thank you also to Michael and Jane for organising tonight, and thank you all for coming. It's such a staple in our community's electoral cycle here. Look, there are a few places I could start, but as someone who's only been in the field as a candidate for a few months, I figured I would start at the beginning. My name's Alex. I'm your local Liberal candidate in Waite. I grew up in the Adelaide Hills where I was born, and I grew up in a small business family. And that taught me a lot of things, but it also taught me, above all else, about hard work. And that is that if there's a job to do, you roll up your sleeves and you get and do it. Now, that value coalesced with my desire to improve the world around us and improve communities. And that's essentially why I'm standing here today. I have worked in our community, with our community, on lots of projects, on lots of local policies and local issues for the past 6+ years. And that's everything from projects such as the Hewitt Sports Ground to Balear National Park, Watunga Botanic Gardens, Carrick Hill, and things like that. And I've been working behind the scenes to make those projects a reality and improve our community. Things such as policy issues from bushfire safety and mitigation through to transport matters, planning matters, and also the freight task in South Australia, which is an important one for us in particular. But above all else, I've really enjoyed working with so many of our local community groups. Run by volunteers, they are the lifeblood of our community, and they are essentially what makes it great. So I've been very pleased to be at everything from the Blackwood pageant to the Rotary Fair. Even if I've been behind the scenes and not in the limelight, I've been there and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I do come with a lot of experience in public administration, and I think that's important because while the local MP here needs to be a strong advocate for us, they also make decisions for all South Australians. So my track record in local government has been defined by reducing debt and deficit, returning an institution to an operating surplus, restructuring an organisation, and all without cutting a single service. I was integral in the establishment of the Adelaide Economic Development Agency, which is supporting small businesses at a very critical time. We kicked off almost $1 billion worth of city-shaping projects. But above all else, what I'm probably most proud of is to have worked on some substantial social policies. And we've led the way, led the nation in everything from homelessness to Indigenous services. And I've been pleased to secure funding and initiatives in that regard as well. You may have recently seen the Services Hub in the Southern Parklands, which was a groundbreaking approach to helping Indigenous people. And we managed to get over 150 Indigenous rough sleepers in the Parklands, the services that they need, and into accommodation. That was something which I was pleased to kick off, first with some research and then with a partnership with the state government. And all of that means I'm not coming in cold, and that's why I've hit the ground running, listening to our community. You've told me things about the Mitcham Hills Road corridor, and I've already secured a review from the government on those critical projects, a planning study for Laffers Road, and particularly where it hits Main Road, because I know that's a key pinch point for our community, and also resolving the lease matter with the Blackwood Rec Centre. I know that involved the Mitcham Council as well, but once I heard that was an issue, I was on the horn to the Education Minister, telling him how important it is, and the Education Department then stumped up more money to fund the maintenance of the Rec Centre, lest it would have been an orphan. So I'm pleased to have already been on the ground delivering for our community. I suppose to summarise, what my candidacy brings is a diligence to work on the issues that are important to all of us, but also compassion, because you can only truly fix a problem if you listen to people, if you understand the trials that they're going through, and that's when you can tailor solutions from a policy perspective and a government perspective and really deliver positive change. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Holmes Ross. Some of you may know me in the community as the former owner of the Artisan Cafe. I've also been a researcher at Flinders University, and up until Monday, I was the Mayor of Mitcham. I've had to stand aside for 3 weeks until this election's over. If I'm unsuccessful, I will very happily go back to being your Mayor. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that we do meet on the lands of the Kaurna people and that we respect their ongoing spiritual relationship with country. So why am I standing, and why as an independent? And the answer is I believe that the community want better representation. Waite is traditionally a safe seat, so people aren't heard and money isn't spent. And this happens in all safe seats, whether they're Liberal or Labor. One party don't spend because they can't win, and the other party don't spend because they don't need to. And so the result is that nothing gets done. So the reason that I'm standing, or one of them, is to break that two-party stranglehold. This election is likely to result in a hung parliament, which gives enormous power to the crossbench, and it's the chance to get some fantastic outcomes for this community. One example of things that could be done is the revitalisation of the Balear National Park. It is a gem in our community with so much potential. I'm thinking perhaps co-management of the park with Kaurna community. It could be a place of research and education, testing traditional management methods such as cultural burns, and rediscovering the endemic biodiversity and ensuring bushfire safety. We need to ensure that the existing facilities are used to their capacity. There is a chronic shortage of open space, particularly for organised sport across Waite. Actually, I blame the ladies. If you didn't want to go out and play sport, we wouldn't have that problem. No, that's a joke. It's a joke. We can't keep clearing native vegetation. We need to maximise the space that we have. So the facilities in the park need to be upgraded to match the current demand. There's a huge capacity for our national park to draw tourists and showcase the area. And some ideas that I have gotten from the community that could help upgrade the park are an outdoor eco pool, a dedicated dog park, extended trails network, frisbee golf course, a First Nations cultural centre, or treetop walks, zip wires, or a second adventure playground. There are no end of possibilities, and of course visitors bring money into the area and help our small businesses. The reason I'm using this example is that it came from our community, from various groups and individuals through various forums. As an independent, my commitment to you is to keep listening to the community and work just for you. As an independent, I have only your interests at heart. No party politics, no pre-existing deals. I'm not beholden to big business through campaign donations. So, without any other agenda, I can and will work tirelessly with and for the people of Waite. Thank you.
Sam, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. This is my third time in front of you, and I think the crowd is getting bigger and bigger every time, which is fantastic. So to Blackwood Uniting Church, to Michael and everyone here, and to Jane and the BBN, thank you for the work that you do in promoting our democracy. I think as Kathy and Heather touched on, community engagement is so high in this electorate, especially up in the hills. And I think we are all very privileged to participate in that, so it keeps every candidate on their toes. Why am I standing before you? For the same reasons I did in 2015 and 2018, and that is to be your voice for the community. That is to work with you locally, whether it's the work we do out of my office, whether it's the work that I've done over the last 7 years with so many of the community groups, from the community groups here at the Blackwood Uniting, through our sporting groups, our volunteer organisations, being your conduit to government, to parliament, to really, I think, across all three levels of government as well, local, state and federal. My office is that hub, as you all know. But more importantly, to be that voice and your representative in Parliament. And that is so important. It is so important that every seat across the state and every member of Parliament is the best representative for their people. And more importantly, can stand up for their community when the community when the government or policy of the day is at odds with their community. And I want to give you 4 examples that I've been able to do that for you over the last 7 years. When the former government wanted to close the Repat Hospital, together our community rallied and we did so much together to ensure that the Repat was reactivated. And what is happening there, and those who now use the facility will see it's a fantastic health precinct. But if it wasn't for people power and for members of Parliament running with their communities, we wouldn't have seen anything happen there. And then in recent years, 3 issues when the current Liberal government had policies that directly affected and would have been to the detriment of our community. The closing of the Mitcham Service SA, the shutting of our buses and closing bus routes, especially through the Mitcham Hills, and the demolition of the Waite Gatehouse. On all 3 of those issues, if I hadn't been able to be your independent MP and your voice, I fear that the government wouldn't have listened, and we would have seen Mitcham Service SA closed. We would have seen the buses routes being cancelled, and it was really MP pressure within the Parliament that saw that happen. And it was you, it was so many of you, it was thousands of you. In fact, it was 8,000 South Australians who signed the petition to save the Waite Gatehouse, to come together and to say, no, the government must listen to the community. And that's what I was able to achieve as your local independent MP. But of course, it's not about what I've done for the last 7 years. It's about what we can do together for the next 4 years and the years beyond that. And that's why I'm so glad so many of you have been able to reach out and have a read of Sam's plan. It is my vision for the community. It may not have everything in there that is important to you, and if there is an issue that you want to see in there, come have a look at it and come have a chat to me. But from protecting our environment and open space, to bushfire mitigation and investing in our CFS and Craigburn Farm, really important issues, to what we're doing in the freight space. Everyone knows the campaign that I've been leading on diverting freight from Crossroad. Really, really important issue, and that of course works and ties in together with the future of public transport. We've got a government that won't listen to the people of Mount Barker and allow for better public transport through there, and of course that affects us through the Balear train line. So those are really, really important issues that as your Member of Parliament I will take into the next term. And it's so important that we continue to champion those and have a representative that can work with all sides of politics, no matter who the government of the day is, and have those working relationships, be able to articulate a vision, be able to work with you, and most importantly, be able to represent you. Thank you.
There are a lot of you, aren't they? See if I can get that. So there we go. I'm assuming everyone can hear me down the back. Yeah, lovely. Friends, my name is Brendan White. I'm running with the Greens. I am going to do something just a little bit unusual. I'm going to say don't vote for me just because I'm asking you to. I'm going to say don't vote for any of us just because we're asking you to. I'm going to say, please, you people here and you people listening back there, you have taken a much bigger step than most people in any electorate have done. You have shown the interest to turn up here. You're here, you're listening, you're paying attention, you're trying to learn, you're trying to understand what the five of us are offering. I'm going to ask you to do something for me. I'm going to ask you, would you please spend 5, maybe 10 minutes of your life having a quick look at our websites, if websites are something you're comfortable with, one of our flyers, something like that. I'm going to ask you, would you please have a look at what the policies say and have a look at what the parties have done in the past and what you think they're going to do in the future. It's really, really easy for any of us to stand up and say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I really will. I will. Really, I will. It's really easy to promise that, and a lot of big parties have promised things which have not always come true. I'm proud to stand with the Greens because we have been consistent. I'm delighted that everyone else is now starting to realise that the climate matters, that our environment matters. I'm trying not to say I told you so. The Greens have been saying that for decades. But look, better late than never. Absolutely. I welcome everyone who joins us. I would love for you all, please, have a look at what we say, have a look at what we've said all along, have a look at what all the parties do, because you have made the effort to come here. You have made the effort to learn something about the way your area, the way your electorate is run. I'm going to ask you to go that little bit further. One of us, or possibly the candidate that's not here, is going to be representing you in State Parliament. Please take a minute to work out what do we do, what do we say we do, what have we consistently said we've done before you pick who you're going to vote for. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements. It is now time for the 3 questions from the host organizations, Blackwood Uniting Church and Blackwood Business Network. I should note that the candidates were sent the questions in advance so they could prepare their answers, and these are 1-minute answers, please. So the first question, and the order, I don't mind, you can decide amongst yourselves. Do you agree that we need a more socially equitable society? And if so, what specific measures would you work towards introducing?
Read what I wrote. So, more socially equitable, in a word, yes. And there are the big obvious things. There's housing, there's education, and there's healthcare, and the major parties are all making statements on those things, and yes, I would be happy to advocate and support those types of things. The parties are all over that. But there are a lot of smaller things that we could be doing to increase social equity. Things like greening our streets. Everyone wants to live in a green street. Providing access to open space. Only state government can create more open space. Councils are doing really well, but with state insisting that 85% of growth is absorbed into the suburbs, we need funding to get more open space. Loneliness is a huge issue, particularly with COVID. Public transport should be a right and not an income generator. Some of our elderly can't get up to Blackwood and back because there isn't a bus that will take them. Things like a community bus that ran from Bellevue Heights to Balear would make so much difference. It's not a huge plan, it's just those little simple things that we could be thinking about as a community and instigating.
Thank you.
Women power.
Yes. Absolutely. I think it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and it worries me that there's many politicians who will never know what it's like to be in a vulnerable situation, but yet they're the ones that are making policy to try and help people. Personally, being a single parent, I have been in a vulnerable situation, and that's why I want a seat at the table, so that we can have people who have this experience helping to craft that policy. Social equality starts with a good education. If we have a child that is given everything they possibly can to achieve, then they're more likely to grow up, earn a stable income, buy their own home, and then go on and be quite successful. Every child deserves that right, and I think it's really important that we do all that we can to give everyone that start in life. We definitely need to be creating jobs through effective policy so that people can be successful, but it needs to be permanent jobs. We've seen casualisation of our workforce only get worse, especially during COVID. We really noted that when so many people lost their jobs so easily. I believe taking the time to listen to community, being accessible, and being able to provide advice, support and advocacy, and stamping out wage theft are all important ways to close the gap. We live in a wealthy country, and we shouldn't be having people doing it so tough.
Thank you.
Friends, I have a bunch of concrete ideas here which I would love to talk to you about. I don't think I'm going to get through very many of them in the time allotted. I'm going to go back to the core of this, which is so many of us in this room have been fortunate enough to have a really good education. We've been fortunate enough to have a roof over our heads every day without having to worry about it. Not all. There will be some people in this room who've done it a lot tougher than some. It is really easy when you've never had to worry about where your next meal's coming from. It's really easy to say, well, I succeeded completely by myself. I achieved this, I achieved that. And you did, and you deserve praise for that. But we also need to remember that without a good education, you can't read and write well enough to be able to read how to run your business. Without roads to get you and your employees, if you happen to run a small business. Without roads that everyone can use, you need to get around. We need, as a community, we need to make sure that everyone gets a decent start. And that's why, of course, we need more social equity, we need better schools, we need more equitable schools. It's not fine for really rich people to have gorgeous schools and everyone else to suffer. Yes, of course, we need more social equity.
Well, I'm really pleased to see, I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Absolutely, and I wouldn't be standing here if I thought we didn't. Look, I think a large part of what it is our society is cyclical or generational poverty. It's an issue which I've been confronted with and seen the disastrous effects of, and those effects are so far-reaching into every facet of someone's life. It's unfathomable unless you've seen it or felt it, or have someone close to you, a loved one that's had that. Look, the best things we can do, they've in part already been touched on. Health outcomes. If you are growing up in that sort of situation, you have terrible health outcomes and chronic health conditions that limit you for the rest of your life. Education. If you don't get, as Kathy said, that education earlier on in your life, it has the same effect. But also, I think the ability for people to have a high-paying and stable job. Those are the three things which I think we need. Look, I'm standing particularly at this point in time for the Liberal Party because we are delivering record amounts in health and education, including in infrastructure, but also the fastest growing economy and our lowest unemployment rate on record. Now, there's a lot more to be done, but I'm really proud that we're steaming ahead on those three key indicators.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think this is a really good question from Blackwood Uniting Church, and I think very much on the unity ticket. I think education, without a shadow of a doubt, is so important, and early intervention and getting to young kids early, do their phonics, participate, do music, express themselves. It's so good for a young person's education. But more, the question is more broader about equity. One is homelessness is a really big issue in the state, and I was actually talking to a provider today from Anglicare, and apparently there's no one in charge of homelessness during caretaker at the moment, which is causing them a real big issue, but that's by the by. Homelessness, housing affordability. 50% of a house and land package in South Australia is chewed up. The cost of that is chewed up by government fees, taxes, and stamp duty. It's a huge cost for people to get into the housing market. Most of us in this room live in our own homes. Blackwood has our community has a high percentage of homeowners, very much less renters. So housing affordability for people, young people across the spectrum, is paramount if we're going to maintain equity in our society, and also deal with the stability that comes with home ownership. And I know Heather touched about it as well, social isolation. Today I door-knocked a lady in Hawthorne Dean. We spoke for half an hour. She hadn't spoken to anyone since Christmas. She's got a lot of family issues. So it's about us as our community to know your neighbour, to support your neighbour, and that's what we can all do as well to help equity in our community.
Thank you. I'm being a bit generous with everyone, by the way, just in case you don't. No, everyone. I know 1 minute is too tight, but I still want to keep it to what we agreed. The second question, given that the South Australian government has committed to more than 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, what 3 things would you promote to ensure that target is easily exceeded?
Mark, thank you. Thank you. Look, the biggest one in my one of the biggest ones is just coal-fired energy generation plants. We have the technology to go green. We need to do it in a sensible way. There are so many jobs that are currently in coal mines and in power plants that use coal. We need to do it in a sensible way, but we need to do it. We need to start. We need to do it without losing jobs. Don't get me wrong. I don't want people out of work. But we need to start. And again, I feel a little embarrassed to say I told you so, but the Greens have been saying this for a very long time. Now some other people are starting to come on board. Again, that's brilliant. There are Australia has, yes, we have a lot of coal in the ground, but we have a lot of other rare earth minerals and all kinds of great stuff which is needed for technology. We don't have to stop mining. We just have to stop mining coal and gas. There are so many useful things that we could be mining. And I'd love to tell you about a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, maybe next question.
Thank you.
Labor and government will invest in a hydrogen plant. We'll take the extra energy that is made on hot and windy days when our grid is completely blown, and we'll turn it into hydrogen. At the moment, the government reaches in or can reach in and turn your solar panels off. We want to use that energy. We want to take it, make it into hydrogen. That's going to attract industry to come to South Australia because they'll be able to access cheap electricity. Plus also we'll be able to export it. We also are going to repeal the electric vehicle tax that's supposed to be coming in 2027. We need to encourage people to take up electric vehicles, not discourage. We also will bring the trains and trams back into public hands, and we've also announced that seniors will be able to travel on public transport for free 24/7. All of those things will get more cars off the road, which is really important when it comes to cutting emissions. And finally, Labor will update the Climate Change and Greenhouse Emissions Reduction Act to reflect short-term targets, and drafting the revised act will consider carbon budgets and government adaptation plans. These changes will will give certainty to renewable energy investors and attract them to set up new generation in South Australia.
So the culprits of emissions in this community are waste, 5%, transport causes 36%, gas, 16%, and electricity, 42%. So 58% of the emissions in our community come from our use of gas and electricity. So what can we do? We can transition to renewable energy. We can use public and active transport, and we can get green waste out of the blue bin. Really simple. Councils would like to empty your green bin weekly and your blue bin fortnightly, but state government doesn't allow that. If we did that, 75% of our waste issues done. We should be embracing EVs, not taxing them. We actually should be manufacturing low-cost EVs. We need, as I said, to improve our public transport. We need to be building usable bike paths. We could start by fixing the Linton Trail. Big one is transitioning to renewables. We have so much sunlight, we have so much wind and tidal energy in this state. The economics all stack up. We should get onto that.
I think South Australia has been leading the way, and former Labor government under Jay Weatherall really started that ball off. And to give this the current government its credit, it's done a lot in the hydrogen space and especially in the battery space as well. And I think both major parties have got a bit of a hydrogen policy going to the next election, and it's good that these issues are being discussed. The other thing is, of course, the way we live in our cities. City livability is so important, and we have seen across metropolitan Adelaide the reduction in our canopy. And we're seeing it in the city of Mitcham, where we are seeing a lot of demolition of properties. We're seeing 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s, 4-for-1s going up. We're seeing significant trees being eroded, and that's why last year in Parliament I introduced the Exceptional Tree Register legislation, and that is on the back of a lot of work with Tom Morrison of Glenouta, who you may know, who's been a real driving force in this space now for a couple of years, and with the Conservation Council. So I think at a state government level, we can do so much about the livability of our cities, the way we protect tree canopy, the way that we build. The modern building code can easily be addressed to take in many of these environmental benefits. And of course, as I said at the beginning, it's the way South Australia plays its role as an exporter of green energy.
Well, the good news is that South Australia actually has currently 60% renewable energy generation on average. In the next few years, we're pegged to hit 100%. That's actually why we're building the interconnector to New South Wales. The investment certainty that exists currently in South Australia means that energy generation is being built, and within a few years, once that interconnector is built, we are going to be exporting renewable energy interstate. Just imagine that. A few years ago, statewide blackout. A few years later, we're a net energy exporter, and that's really, really exciting. So we're actually doing okay in energy at the moment. 3 areas for improvement: 1, construction; 2, agriculture; 3, transport. In construction, as you would know, and this is mostly civil construction and large projects, there is a lot of carbon emissions that goes into creating concrete. There are other mixtures of lime and cement that can actually produce a much lower emissions intensity with that. Number 2, I think it was transport, I said. In transport, we can see use of hydrogen, and when I'm talking about transport, I'm not talking about domestic and EV, I'm actually talking about freight. Because hydrogen is an energy-dense element, freight and trains and trucks, it's actually really suitable for that. And lastly, in agriculture, blue carbon storage and carbon sequestration. The agriculture or agri-businesses are actually really keen to look at this, and it actually could be a revenue stream for them as well.
Thank you. And the final prepared question reads like this. Many people feel a sense of helplessness in regards to the urgency for climate change action. They recognize any major positive climate action needs to be driven by government, but what is the leadership to help them as individuals do positive things? If you're elected, what will you do to engage the public, empower them with a sense of agency, and encourage them to contribute to climate action in positive ways?
What I would encourage the common person on the street to do is vote for someone who can actually make a change and who actually will make a change. We've heard a lot of ideas here. We've known that for years. We've known for years that you can build solar, you can build all kinds of things. No one's doing it, and no one's gonna, as long as the big parties are still receiving huge donations from mining companies, from coal mining companies. We need to fix that. And all of us can go to protests, we can write letters, we can do whatever we want, as long as the people who make the decisions are being paid huge amounts of money by vested interests. They're going to give lip service, and then they're going to do what suits their hip pocket. We need to vote for someone who's actually going to do something.
I'd start by encouraging everybody to watch the movie 2040. I came here a couple of weeks back, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the room did as well, and it was a real eye-opener as to what life could be like in 2040 if we just use the technology we've got now, not waiting till 2030 to start. It's so important that we get moving on it, but our local communities have a lot to do. We already recycle pretty well, but I think education is key because lots of people don't know the extra things. We know the yellow bins for the boxes and the cans, and we know the green bin or the compost is for the food, but the masks that all of the people are wearing with blue, they can be recycled too. In fact, there's a bin in Mitcham stationery shop. We need to work with council to install more EV charging stations, and that will help people feel encouraged to buy electric cars. And we also need to look at more solar schemes without hidden charges so that people will be encouraged to get more solar panels. Encouraging the community to use public transport again would be great, but I think education is definitely the key. So I'd work to encourage and educate and advocate for climate change. It's an emergency, and we need all arms of the government working together to make sure that we've got a beautiful planet to leave to our children, because so they tell me there is no planet B.
Many of you might know that I went to the mayoral election with the idea of a 100% solar city. And the idea was to allow access to solar panels to all residents. So last Tuesday, council voted on a plan which would make this a reality. The report and the result are in confidence. However, we went to market and asked businesses to partner with council. They needed the capacity to provide no upfront cost solar, photovoltaics and battery and cheaper power. We had 14 responses to those tenders. That means that there is businesses out there that want to partner with local government. We could have the capacity to build virtual power plants in every local government area. So everybody could be part of these power plants, receiving cheaper power and feeding into the grid. We could use that power, as Kathy said, to power smart manufacturing into the future. We would have access, and we could think about attracting smaller... Oh gosh, I'm reading over what I was saying. Sorry. Anyway, this is a way, by being part of a virtual power plant, that all of us could be involved, all the community could be involved and work towards a better, brighter, sustainable future.
We need to plant more trees. It's quite simple. And that's why one of my policy initiatives, again in Sam's plan, is the Great State Tree Voucher. We've had the accommodation voucher, but that is a simple plan that together with the state government, a $10 rebate for all South Australians to buy a tree, to plant it, to support local business and to plant it in the environment. It's a $10 million policy, but imagine if we could plant 1 million trees like that. It'd be quite incredible, easy to do. So it's about the canopy, and of course government has a role. But we as individuals have a huge role. We are consumers. We consume every day. We are very happy to go to Bunnings and buy that $20 kettle and that $20 toaster. And we as consumers need to change our behaviour as well if we're serious about the environment and the way that we manufacture, the way that we allow imported goods from overseas and what we do. Because us as South Australians, as Australians, we also need to change the way we live, the light globes that we buy in our house. As I said earlier, the way we build our homes, they all It all contributes to climate change and to energy efficiency. But you know, there's 26 million of us. We shop, we vote, we can shop with our feet, and of course we vote with our feet as well. So I say to us as consumers, let's change the way that we go about buying and then of course back at reinvesting in our communities.
Well, the question is around obviously what we can do, all of us, leaders in the community, I think, have a role to play, and actually I agree with Kathy more than the other candidates up here. It is around education. What I would do, were I successful in the election, obviously MPs put on forums and engage with the community in that way. I'd like to do a sustainability series in that regard. There are many groups I've worked with in the past, such as KeySab, and KeySab, if you just hop on their website, have a whole heap of different forums. They're a waste management company. They do with everything from what to do with food scraps towards what to put in which bin. Of course, separating your recycling is so important, and it still shocks me every now and again, because I was raised in a very environmentally conscious household, to run into people even in my own age group that don't know that you've got to unscrew this and separate that and put them in the appropriate spot. So that education piece is really important. There's also another great resource for people that are either building or renovating a home. It's been launched by the federal government. It goes through all facets of sustainable home design. And those are things that we don't know about because we live in a very information-rich era. The resources are all there, and as your MP, I would pull them all together, package them up, and deliver them to you so you can make use of them.
Thank you. Thanks for the answers to all those prepared questions. That brings us to the time for the open Q&A with questions from the audience. I understand there are a couple of mics available, one over here and one over there, so just approach the microphone and proceed to ask the question. Remember the rules for the audience: state your name, your suburb, and then proceed to ask the question. And for the candidates, try to keep it to 1 minute per answer, just to allow for as many questions as possible.
My name's Eric. I'm a newcomer here. I've only lived in Hawthorndean for 25 years, despite the accent. My great problem is I've been working in health in South Australia for 50 years. I'm retired now. For the 55 years I've been in Australia, we've had Labour governments for at least 40 years. The trouble with the health service now cannot be blamed, surely, on the last 3 or 4 years. Mike Rand said many years ago, a Labour government will never shut the repat. Well, you may not have noticed, but I worked here when they shut it, and I protested. So that's the preamble. My question is to the Labour candidate. As a Labour candidate, you are bound by Labour policy. Whatever you think or say or feel should be right, you will vote what your Premier says. How can I trust you not to denigrate the health market, the health service anymore?
Thanks, Eric, for the first question. Look, I understand that the repat meant a lot to people. It had a very sentimental place in our heart, but Labor had some plans as well, and they certainly spent a lot of money in the hospital system, upgrading the palliative care and the cancer ward. But why you can trust me is because we've already announced all of our costed policies to improve the health system. We're investing in 300 new beds, 300 new nurses, 100 new doctors. We're also supporting our ambulance staff by recruiting another 350 ambos, new ambulance stations. We're also working hard to bring all of the hospitals up to good standard with lots of investment in regional hospitals as well. So we're taking the money that the Liberal Party want to spend on their basketball stadium, and we're investing all of that in health. And it's so important to me that we have that. I've got ageing parents who, one in particular is not as well as he could be. So I need to make sure that the health system is okay. Plus, a lot of my family work in health as well. In fact, a couple of them at Flinders. So they're going to hold me accountable too. In fact, one of my neighbours has already rung me and said, I want to talk to you about the health policy. So you can trust me because I'll make sure of it. And it's so important to me because we're all going to need to use it.
Thank you. Wait, as I said earlier, I'm happy for anyone else to have a go at the question. So a question on why should they trust you with your health policies. So if anyone wants to have a go at this one, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Benita. I just want to maybe move away from the first part of Eric's question to Labor, maybe spend a quick minute on mental health. And I think that's a very important issue to people, if that's all right, if I can take the question that way.
As long as you link it to trust as well.
Yes, all right. Eric, you know you can trust me on mental health. We've had so many discussions about this issue over many, many years, but we need to do more in this space. And that is why one of my plans is to see if we can have a planning study to reactivating the Blackwood Hospital site as a community precinct. One thing that we don't have enough of is community mental health outreach. We're seeing, and one of the real big bad block issues is EDs being used for treatment of mental health. This needs to be a community issue, it needs to be a community-led issue, and that's why we need to actually invest directly into our community spaces on mental health beds, on step-down facilities, and to provide the support where people need them, not in a clinical tertiary setting, but in the community where it's available.
Yep.
I suppose I feel that. Come on.
Yeah.
Hello. My question is, I suppose, are we fixing the right problem? So there is definitely issues with our healthcare system, but is throwing more doctors and more nurses and more ambulances the answer? Or do we need to look more deeply into what the problem is with our hospital? For example, ambulances are ramping because there's nowhere to take the patients. Are we better off to look at after hours clinics and nurse practitioners and other ideas rather than just fixing the problem that we think there is? So as a scientist, I really like the idea of working out exactly what the problem is before we try and fix it. Can you trust me? Absolutely, I'm an independent.
Well, I'm very pleased Eric touched on the real crux of the issue, and that is that government policy is like a freight train. You can change the driver, but there's certain inertia there and it takes time to redirect it. Our record expenditure in health is working, but a lot of those projects are yet to completely come online, and we'll see the benefits once they do. But I just want to pick up on the trust issue as well, and it wasn't just the Labor Party that closed that. We have to remember, after 2014, it was a hung parliament. It was a hung parliament where Labor formed a majority government with the support of two independents who took cabinet spots. Now, neither of those independents promised or said or flagged that they were going to close the repat. Indeed, Labor did not flag that they were going to close the repat at the election. And it just goes to show the inherent unpredictability of what can happen when you get a hung parliament. You do get things that weren't discussed at the election. You do get things that are thrown up after the fact. Now, I'm not saying either of these two would close the repat, but I am saying hung parliaments do result in outcomes which were not thought about at the time of the election.
Thank you.
I can see the queue lining up there. I'll try to make this brief. You can trust the Greens because we have said consistently all along that we need to get mental health into sorry, brain gone blank, into publicly funded healthcare. We need to get mental and dental in, and when you start getting the money going in there, then suddenly you can fund things like mental health outreach places all over the place. You can start putting things where they're needed if you actually get the money going in, and we have fully funded plans to do that.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
My name's Chris Charlesworth, Hawthorne Dean. I'm from the Anglican Holy Innocents Church Environment and Social Justice Group. The efforts of South Australia in emissions reduction is commendable. However, we are going to suffer the effects of climate change. The latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says there is a rapidly narrowing window of opportunity to enable climate resilient development. So my question is, what would you do to urge the newly elected state government to mitigate the effects of the greatly increased threat of catastrophic fires on communities in the Adelaide Hills and for rising sea levels on our coastal communities.
Thank you. I'm happy to move to the next question if no one tackles this one. And I'll keep you tight because I can see there's a lot of people queuing, so just everyone be brief, please.
I'll take it. I am a firefighter, and I know that last summer the Cherry Gardens fire really scared a lot of people. We all looked up the hill. Well, I didn't because I was there, but massive smoke plumes, and it really brought people's attention to what they need to do about bushfire. So I can already tell you I talk to the Shadow Emergency Services Minister every second day about what we need to be doing in terms of being ready for bushfires. We definitely need to be responsible ourselves because our properties need to be cleared, but government as well needs to take part in some of the mitigation strategies. In terms of the rising sea levels, we just need to start doing something about climate change. It's okay to, do these things locally, but we need a federal government that actually wants to lead on climate change, that actually wants to make a difference, and one that actually believes that it exists.
Thank you.
It's a really good question, and I would have worked it into one of the earlier climate change answers, but there wasn't enough time. We are past the point where we can avoid it entirely, in short. And adaptation, and as you said, resilience, is actually key. I suppose on bushfire safety, first, after the awful fires we saw in South Australia, the government implemented a review. That review came back. We put in place an extra $48 million to bushfire safety and mitigation. Importantly, part of it was that we now have an overarching statewide strategy regarding bushfire safety and also what happens after the event of a bushfire. Importantly now, we are going through and redoing all of the local area bushfire management plans. That's underway at the moment for our area, and it's something that I, as your local MP, would want to have specific input in to make sure that we are resourcing effectively all that we need to do. But just on adaptation, very, very briefly.
No, please. There's a long queue.
Sure.
Next one.
Chris, thanks for that question. A very good question. Quickly on bushfires, yes, we have to be bushfire ready as a community, and that's why I certainly support a second exit south of Craigburn Farm onto Blacks Road. So that's for us, our community resilience. But one thing that there's been a bit of an issue lately is around pastoral lands, and the government has a proposed bill before the pastoral lands that is going to fundamentally change our relationship with pastoral lands, I think detrimentally. And it would take away, for example, the right of revegetation on pastoral lands. And that's something that the revegetation, the natural space returning as much as our land as we can to native vegetation is a huge part that we can play as policymakers.
Thank you. Over there, please.
Hi, can I ask a question? Right, this is directed at you, Sam. I'm Lynn Such from Coromandel Valley. As a member of the End of Life Choices Committee, I think in 2019, your visit with the other members of the committee to Melbourne to look at how Victoria's voluntary assisted dying legislation operated in Victoria. During a meeting, the committee spoke to a retired judge, or QC, on the issue of looking at if there was any coercion with the people who chose to end their life with dignity. The judge reported to the committee that there was not one case of coercion. I think she looked at 140 cases. In fact, she found the opposite in every case. Loved ones of the individual did not want their loved one to choose to end their life with dignity and love. Soon after you returned
Please formulate the question, please.
Pardon?
Please formulate the question, otherwise we'll be here for...
Please, what's...
Formulate the question, please.
Did you say finish?
No, formulate the question. Ask the question.
I can't understand.
Ask the question, please.
Oh, why did you arrive at your decision not to support voluntary assisted dying when I imagine 87% to 92% of people in Waite would have wanted some form? Did you do a proper questionnaire, or how did you arrive at that decision?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Lynn. As everyone, or most people in this room will know, there was a debate last year in State Parliament around voluntary assisted dying. that bill did pass the Parliament. Also, as many people in this room are aware, I didn't support that legislation.
But I want to. Why?
Please
What-
let him finish.
I didn't support that legislation. As going through that legislation for myself, and of course this is a conscience vote issue across all parliaments for all members, I felt that I couldn't support that. And that's not to say that there isn't. There are a lot of merits in that bill, and I think the bill that was before the South Australian Parliament is one of the better bills that we have. But I suppose this is a matter of conscience for MPs. This is an issue that we won't agree on, Lynn, and I know that I'm out of step with possibly many in this room. But also say that it's not uniformity. It is a very grey area. It's a very difficult area. How we talk about end of life is very difficult. How we interact with the health system is very problematic. And as I've always been a very strong passionate and advocate for is better palliative care services, I think that's an important part of the debate. We know the legislation has passed. It's coming into effect in 2022. Thank you.
But I believe you didn't
Please.
reflect the views of people in Waite, Sam.
He's already addressed the question, please. If anyone feels like they need to comment on this quickly.
I want to say very quickly that, yes, of course it's a difficult question. No one likes to think about it. No one likes to think about dying. Of course we need better palliative care. Of course. At the end of the day, though, if someone has a decent chance of getting better, if someone has a decent chance of living another 6 to 12 months, they're not going to consider this. This is for people who are dying. This is for people who have had that choice taken away from them. They are not choosing to die. That choice has been made, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in fate. That choice has been made to them, for them. They are simply getting to choose the time and whether it has dignity.
I just want to quickly say that I do support a person's right to choose how their life ends. So I think it's perhaps unfair to make that choice for them. So I would, in the same position, have voted for voluntary euthanasia.
I think that as an MP, you are elected to represent the thoughts and the views of your community, and it was pretty clear that most in our community supported voluntary assisted dying, including myself. I recently watched my mother-in-law pass away, and she said to me, "Well, I don't know how long it takes to die." She was in her right mind, and if the legislation had already been through, I'm pretty sure she would have chosen that. And I think if you've lived your life and you're of sane mind and you can make that decision, you absolutely should be able to.
Just to add very quickly, because it does come up often, look, I don't personally support it, and I wouldn't choose it for myself, and I do believe that, I'll get there, and I do believe that the true idea of dying with dignity is palliative care, and that really is a choice. But there does come a point, a threshold, and it's a qualitative threshold at which you balance your own views with the community's views. And as I've said to many in the public that have asked me, I would have supported it in its final form with some amendments that went through around a conscientious objection and not forcing someone to act against their own beliefs, because there are others that would do it. So I just wanted to make that clear, even though my personal position is not to support it. It is something that I think comes a point where you have to, particularly when it's an overwhelming majority, back your community.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to our host tonight, and thank you to the 5 candidates in front of us tonight for putting up your hand to potentially represent the community. My name is Lindy Torber. I'm the acting mayor for the city of Mitcham. I'm a Waite resident of Eden Hills, and my question comes from the council chamber, and it relates to Waite Street Reserve and Young Street. The council and the community have been asking for decades to create a village green and a heart for Blackwood, and we're well advanced for that. Waite Street Reserve needs upgrades, we need further parking around there, and we want to maximise the interface and interactions between the hub and the reserve. We also want to improve Young Street, and we're already working with Drake's Supermarket. who are improving things. My question to you on behalf of Council is, will you financially commit to partnering with Council to improve Waite Street Reserve and Young Street? And if so, to what dollar value?
Thanks, Lindy. More broadly, the stuff that has been happening and the proposed new hub and the land swap on Waite Street and Young Street has been fantastic, and when it happens it's going to be a huge improvement to our city in Blackwood Centre. Our small business traders are doing it pretty tough at the moment, and it's because of people like you supporting them that they're still in business. But yes, happy to go back to state government using my position as an independent member to ensure that we can partner, as state, federal and local have partnered on the library hub, which has been a great three levels of government working together. Yes, there is scope. I'd love to see a figure come from council for what is required, but yes, there is absolutely scope to improve the parking outside of my office, absolutely.
Anyone else wants to engage with this question?
So I have already announced that I would advocate for $3 million to be to finish this project. The Waite, as Sam has alluded to, the hub is paid for, but that's only part of the plan for a catalyst for the Blackwood area. So there's a plan to upgrade Young Street, which includes turning it into a market square type area, to do quite a large upgrade to the Waite Street Reserve. Can you hear me? Yeah. Quite a large upgrade to the Waite Street Reserve as well. Council, I believe, have put a figure on that, and I believe all the candidates know that that figure was $2 million. I have added another $1 million because there is extra parts to the building that may need funding. I would like the upgrade to be fantastic because I believe that it will do so much for our precinct, to have a heart and to be the thing that starts the redevelopment, that starts the reinvigoration of Blackwood. So I'm fully supportive of it. It's something council's worked on for years. I'm behind it.
Thank you.
The Waite Street Reserve and the Blackwood Plan has been around for a while. My dad ran for council, I think, 12 years ago, and we were talking about the Blackwood Plan then. I am doing everything I can, Lindy, wherever you are, and absolutely talking to the big decision makers about that, because it is important that we have that beautiful space for our community. I think we could, shut some roads and have some great markets and some great festivals there. So watch this space.
Well, revitalising what is essentially our main street in the area is incredibly important. I think Council have come a long way in progressing some plans. I think we do need a little bit more planning about how we bring all the stakeholders together. I have already had preliminary discussions with the Treasurer about that. Same as everyone else up here, I would of course be advocating for that funding, but I would also like us to go one step further, to think about the broader connectivity, particularly for pedestrians in the broader precinct, because that's something which is really key. If we can connect those communities, if we can think about how to bring people in better and make it more convenient, that will then have a flow-on effect and support our small businesses as well.
Super quick, the Greens always have and always will support public areas, community spaces, so yeah, we would look at doing whatever we need to make that work for all you guys.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Hilary Thompson and I'm a resident of Blackwood. Now, we've heard tonight talk about sustainable electricity, we've talked about recycling, but I'd like to take it one step further, because what I never hear is how do we recycle the batteries, the wind farm equipment and the solar panels when they all run out? What would you guys do to ensure that South Australia has a really good recycling facility to be able to take it that step so that we don't end up with a whole heap of batteries or wind farm vanes and what have you buried in the ground. Thank you.
Thinking ahead, which is really important, and it does concern me as well, the amount of lithium-ion batteries that we're bringing in and how we deal with them once they reach the end of their asset life. Look, the first thing in answering that question is we need more energy generation and reliability. Breaking down and recycling those materials is very, very energy intensive, and if we don't have that adequate capacity to deal with that, and also cheaper energy as well, which comes from reliability, if we don't have the ability to do that, we won't be able to pump in the energy necessary to break them down to their base materials and to be able to use them again.
Okay, I'll go next. There's the steps that we need to look at how we can build new power plants or wind generation, all those things, with fewer. We need to look at the universities and the industry who are already doing that sort of work. They're already looking at how can we build these things with fewer things that need to go into the ground. That needs support from the government. So obviously the Greens would be supporting that. And yeah, we need to move away from coal. We need to start doing that very soon, but we need to do it in a sustainable way. So yeah, we need to look at the options and evaluate them. The technology is being developed already. We just need to have the political will to do it.
Thank you, Hilary. Someone asked me this the other day on the doors, actually, so I did a bit of research and asked our team in the environment sector. And there actually is a company in South Australia, and they're called Reclaim PV Recycling. And they take all of the solar panels and they're able to put them in a... I'm not a technical expert, so I'll just tell you. It's a thermal deconstruction technique. So they make it incredibly hot, which then allows them to separate the parts. And then on completion of that, the recovered components are sorted and placed in collection bins. And then those parts of the panels are able to be recycled by other companies that use those materials. So there is something in place. And I think going forward, obviously, as we take more solar, then companies like this will grow and we'll get new ones, and there'll be always some ways to recycle. So thank you.
Kathy stole my thunder. I was going to tell you exactly the same thing, that you can. There is a company that does recycle photovoltaics. As Mayor, I went to Canberra on a BLGA conference and was instructed by my council to advocate for the federal government to put money into researching exactly this. So we've been thinking about this for a while, research into recycling batteries. Another one is synthetic turf. We need to work out how to dispose of that. So yes, we need funding. Could it come at the state level? Maybe. We do have 3 world-class universities in Adelaide that are all very capable of finding these solutions if the funding's there. But I do think that it's a push at the federal level to make it happen.
Very good question, Hilary, and obviously goes to the practical elements of waste. Yes, as everyone said, we need integrated R&D with government leading the way, working with our university sector and with companies to drive the technology that is there, but to give them the right incentives to look after the issue that is going to come as we deal with this waste issue. But yeah, we need to be doing it, of course, and making it a priority for especially the departments in charge of these matters.
Angus Rainbow of Balear. I wish I'd been able to speak after Linda, because it seems some projects are prioritised over at the expense of other residents. Do you have a documented, coordinated plan to resolve the continued harassing modified vehicle and motorcycle noise, speeding, burnouts and hooning, among other activities perpetrated by gangs driving in the Windy Point restaurant car park, using Balear Road, Old Balear Road, James Road, Blackwood Road and connecting suburban roads? And what does your documented policy state? And are you aware that after many years of ineffective coordinated police, council and Department of Transport action, a newly formed group of residents under the banner Balear Anti-Hoon Action Group have been formed to raise awareness in the community and local government?
Thank you. Thanks, I didn't catch your name.
Angus.
Angus, I do, because I printed the flyers for Ian Cook and the group of you guys that have been doing some great work. It is a real big issue. Hooning on past Windy Point, Kalara Road, through our communities, as I said, is a really big issue. One thing that has concerned me, and this has been a byproduct of COVID, is we've seen a reduction in community policing. Our SAPOL resource has been so tied up with COVID for the last 2 years, and I had a meeting with Sturt Police Station group not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, one of the big issues. So getting more cops back on the beat is really important. I think we probably need to look at the long-term management of Windy Point Car Park after hours, and I know the Blackwood Action Group have been doing a great deal of work, started with I think Pauline at the front there, but the whole group beautifying the front, but it's the back end after hours that's a real big issue. And of course community policing, and it's time for us to maybe do a review of speed limits as well through some of those back roads. Now that doesn't stop the hoons, but if we all come to it together, there are a few issues. But the biggest one is community policing, and we've got to get that back after post-COVID.
Anyone else?
I suppose the other, Sam is right that we do need to do things about Windy Point. Windy Point is kind of lost between council and state government. No one really wants to make a plan for it or put money into it, and it could be such a beautiful gem within our community. So funding for Windy Point altogether, yes, a good thing. In terms of hoons, I think we need to look at deeply into the question. We can deal with the hooning behaviour by various ways, increased policing and those type of things. But I think we also need to be looking for the cause. What is it that makes these kids need to go out and do this? And so, again, looking into the problem more deeply than just the Band-Aid easy solution.
I think it does come down to community policing. I think it's something I've actually raised, and Angus, you're not an orphan with this problem. Main Road Corro gets quite a bit as well, and I've had a lot of complaints about it there too. It was one thing I've raised with the Minister for Police. I think once those resources are again liberated, like Sam says, I think it's time for a bit of a blitz in these particular areas. The laws are definitely there. The anti-hoon laws are absolutely there. It's just a case of having the resources to catch them. It should only take a few pengs and some consistent presence from police to rectify this behaviour. I don't generally support lowering speed limits on main roads, because I don't think we should all be punished for the behaviour of a few, but we do need to weed out the few.
Next question.
Last year, an amazing thing happened in the South Australian Parliament when legislation to change and alter our ICAC was passed by every single member of Parliament in both houses within 24 hours. Now, some would say we are left with a diminished and weakened ICAC, an emasculated ICAC. I wonder where you stand on that, and whether you think our ICAC that we're left with is strong enough to protect our society from corruption that unavoidably happens in public life.
Thank you.
Sorry, so I didn't catch your name either.
Oh, Daryl.
Daryl, a good question, probably given I'm in Parliament, should take that question first. Look, Daryl, a very emotive topic, very complicated topic. Before the two houses of Parliament made their decision, there was a very lengthy Crime and Public Integrity Commission report chaired by the Honourable Frank Pangello, SA Best MP, that took evidence on this issue for months and months, and really looked at quite a few issues, including the late Doug Barr issue, who was a police sergeant, or police detective, the issue with ICAC, and of course the Renewal SA issue with Mr Hanlon and Ms Vaccination. Two really big issues, and there was a raft of recommendations in that report which had support from eminent QCs like Michael Abbott QC, from the Police Association, and from a lot of people in the legal jurisdiction. I think there's some changes to the ICAC legislation which have been good. For example, the fact that you can't, if you were put before ICAC, you couldn't take legal representation, and you're before a Star Chamber by yourself, for an issue that you actually haven't been charged with, is really concerning. So some of the changes to the ICAC are actually giving greater protection to the individual over the right of the state. Do we need protections to deal with corruption? Absolutely. Are they still there in the legislation? Absolutely.
Thanks, Darryl. I've been knocking on the doors a bit lately, and the ICAC does come up a lot, and I understand people are angry. I believe, so I actually took it to our deputy leader, Susan Close, and I had a good chat with her about why it went through and what the other options were. And what she told me was that the ICAC in itself was hurting people, a bit like what Sam just said, and investigations were taking a really, really long time to come through, and people were getting ill when they wait. And as an industrial advocate, I see that just in the banking industry. When people are being investigated, they can take for ages, and it impacts people's mental health. So the changes that came through, whilst they were rushed, the bill was rushed into Parliament earlier than Labor expected. All of every politician voted for it, and I think it's because they saw it as an opportunity to make some change to that bill, to try and protect the people who were being investigated and didn't necessarily do anything wrong. And from also what I know, Labor did put through a whole lot of amendments to it to try and make it a bit better, but the ICAC Commissioner will still be able to investigate corruption, and then what happens with people who aren't in the public sector, the other stuff will be handled by the Commissioner. So, yeah.
I am a political cynic, but I can't believe that everybody in our Parliament voted for something that was that self-serving. I don't think that we've gotten that bad. So I think that there are reasons that the ICAC bill went through as was. But I do take the point that we need legislation with teeth, whether it's through ICAC or the police or another body to do these investigations into maladministration and corruption. So that's where I am.
Real quick, yes, we need an ICAC with teeth. We need it at state level. We also need it at the federal level.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Only to make the observation, because it hasn't been made yet, that this was the first time we had one in South Australia. Clearly parts of it were so flawed, because I think there's a High Court challenge on at the moment around the role of ICAC versus the DPP. So even some of the simplest things around who investigates what and at what time, even some of those simplest things weren't yet ironed out, and at least those have been able to be fixed. But it's clear that it was very clunky, it was very slow the whole way through, and even those fundamentals weren't yet ironed out.
Hello, my name's Luke from Hawthorne Dean. One of you will become not just the representative of us here tonight, but the representative of thousands more within the electorate of Waite. When you vote in Parliament, conscious vote or not, it is our voice being heard. In what ways do you intend to stay informed of this electorate's position on matters before Parliament, and how will you vote when this electorate is at odds with either your affiliated party or your personal position?
Yeah, go ahead.
We've got to jump up first. Thanks for the question, Luke. A very good question. I think one was how would I inform the community on issues? How would I stay informed? Well, everyone knows where to find me. You wouldn't believe how many people contact me. You can see me at Foodland most Saturdays or down at Mitcham Square. People email me daily. I think I've ensured that over the last 7 years as your local member, I'm extremely accessible. People come in all the time, and I pick up the phone, I talk to people, we all know that. But more importantly, the question was about voting and when the government of the day is at odds with the community's best interest. I think, as I said in my opening remarks, 4 examples, and 3 in this term of Parliament, where I've gone against the party of the day, to vote for the best interest of my community. I stand by that, and I will do it again and again and again, because that is the role of a local MP.
As Mayor, I've been possibly the most accessible Mayor in the state. I have run every Wednesday from 3 till 6 p.m. an open forum where people from the community can walk in without an appointment and talk about whatever they want. That would be something that I would like to continue as the local MP, because it is so important to stay in touch with the community. I suppose additional to that, as an independent, I would never have to vote along party lines. I can always vote for the best outcome for my community, which is one of the big reasons that I chose to stand as an independent.
The first part of your question, Luke, accessibility, as Sam touched on. Look, on all of my flyers, the phone number listed there is my personal number. I think accessibility is important, not just taking contact where people are proactive. A lot of people won't proactively contact you, so consistent door knocking, street corner meetings, being out there and listening to people and engaging with them on issues. Certainly some of the ones that Sam listed, there is a clear benefit or detriment to the community. On policy, it gets a lot more complicated, because what may benefit one person in the community may be a detriment to another. And that's where you really need to be in touch with everyone. And you also need to collaborate with the community to work out what is the best way through a particular policy situation. As a government candidate or a major party candidate, a lot of that discussion happens in the party room. So Sam talks about Service SA and what have you. I know those discussions happen in the party room, and there were firm representations made on that issue. But even some local projects aren't necessarily clear-cut, and I see John Denley coming up. Old Balear and James Road, $20 million. Some people want it spent, some people want it don't want it spent. So that's a good example of where you need to balance those interests.
Yep.
So something that's really important to me is being engaged with the local community. You can definitely come to me, but I think I'm going to be out there coming to you because it's really important for me to know exactly how you feel about things. I'll have a seat in the party room. I'll be able to bring your views to the party. And I think that's a really good part of being a part of an actual government party rather than an independent. Sorry, guys. Because you do get to sit down and debate what the policy might be. And I think it's important as well that we all are a little bit more transparent about what is being discussed. And so if there are things that are going to impact our community, then I envisage that I'll be able to come out and let you know. And I think we need to find other ways to communicate as well. Obviously for a lot of people, social media works, but for other people, they might need a letter if it's going to impact them. But I really am passionate about finding out what our community feels, because I want to be the representative of the community.
I have a few things to say which are already been mentioned. Yes, of course, we need to do door knocking. Of course, we need to go to public areas and listen to people. And of course, we need to be proactive. We need to go out and actually ask people rather than waiting for the people who come and talk to us are important, but the people who don't feel that they can talk to us are important as well. One thing I just wanted to mention was that asking people what they want or what they think is the solution is great. It's also important to then start questioning, how does that affect you? Why does that affect you? What's the reasoning behind it? Because sometimes some people see one part of a problem, some people see another part of the problem. I've been a business analyst for most of my adult life. Understanding why someone feels passionately about something can often tell you a lot more about how you can fix the root cause of the problem and not just the surface problem.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name's Jackie. I'm a resident at Bellevue Heights. I'm also a mental health clinician. And so I really appreciate that you acknowledge the needs of our community in terms of mental health, because there is a great need, and especially so, I'd say, over the last couple of years. The service that I worked with 12 to 25-year-olds, and when the mandates for the COVID vaccinations rolled out in November, we lost a quarter of the staff there. So clinicians and other support staff there. So this obviously had a huge detriment, not only to those employees that lost their jobs and their families, but also the recipients of that service. So my question to you is, what is your stance on mandatory vaccination and the current medical apartheid we are experiencing all over Australia?
So I am a great believer that every person should be in control of what they do to their own bodies. So I am totally happy for people to choose not to have the vaccine. However, I believe that, one, COVID is real. Two, that a vaccine will help you, if not save your life. And that at this point we need to be, as a community, covering for our children and for our vulnerable, and the way that we do that is through vaccines. So while I respect the right of people not to be vaccinated, at this point in time there isn't enough people immunised in the community to provide herd immunity, and so the people that have chosen not to for a while need to step back. I know it's not an answer that some people would like to hear. Once we are vaccinated, once our community reaches a certain level of vaccination, we will be able to protect everybody that's not vaccination, whether by choice or because they can't.
Thanks for the question, Jackie. A very important question, and a question that once again doesn't affect everyone, because we are sort of at 90% vaccinated across South Australia, and we do definitely meet the WHO definition of herd immunity. I don't support vaccine mandates. I've been quite consistent about that. I believe everyone needs to be doing the right thing, and as we really have, especially in our community up here, we really have done the right thing. But like anything, there are unintended consequences as well, and we need to really balance it up. And the thing that probably over the time of COVID, and this is why Parliament is so important and who we represent is so important, the decision about whether we compulsorily vaccinate a whole segment of society, rightly or wrongly, has been taken by one individual, and that's no reflection on the Police Commissioner. He's done an incredibly good job in dealing with this pandemic. But it's a debate that I think Parliament should have had, and unfortunately we missed out on that opportunity. But in principle, no. But in saying that, I've done all the right things in terms of COVID. But yeah, to your question, no, I don't.
Thank you. Just a small point. No one has been forcibly vaccinated. No one has been required to be vaccinated. We have taken sensible measures to say, if people are at a greater risk of passing on this virus, then we need to take sensible measures to keep them away from a place where lots of sick people come in. We need to do something, but yeah, I just want to make absolutely no one in Australia has ever been forcibly vaccinated. And
having your right to a livelihood of earning money is pretty much equated to we don't have a choice.
Anyone else wants to? Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brendan. I don't disagree. Certainly, there is no government looming over you, putting the needle in your arm. But as you say, if you are going to lose your job, you may be compelled, or you may feel compelled to do something. And so, while it's strictly not, it does sort of go in that direction. As a Liberal, there are two key principles that I balance here. On the one hand, your right to freedom, liberty, and autonomy over your body. On the other hand, your obligation to not do harm to those around you. Now, the pendulum has certainly swung towards the do not do harm to other people around you, as we've brought in restrictions and what have you, and we've done the right thing, and I am quite happily double vaccinated. Not due for my third yet. But as we learn to live with COVID, that pendulum easing restrictions, including these ones, will swing back the other way. I expect it to. I expect us to be able to have a new normal in the future. Now, what that looks like, I'll base my personal view off the public health advice and balance that against my values, but it should definitely be done with the Parliament.
Let him finish. Next question, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I missed you. Sorry. Apologies. Go on.
I said before that I'm an industrial advocate, and within the banking industry, some of our employers have mandated the vaccine, and it's been incredibly challenging for those staff. A lot of them have now lost their jobs, and a lot of them, thankfully, have been waiting for Novavax and will be able to keep their jobs. In terms of whether or not I support mandating vaccinations, I feel like you should be able to make a decision on your own. However, in the interest of our whole community, if we are managing to get most of them vaccinated, then we're best arming ourselves against the virus. We don't know what the next virus is going to look like, but I think it's really important that we do our best to follow the health advice that we're given.
Yes, my name's John from Glenouta, and thanks, Alex, for the introduction. Yes, my question is actually for you, so I'll replay the compliment. And I do want to talk about Old Balear Road and James Road. The government currently has an application to the Native Vegetation Council to remove 148 native trees. This is grey box, this is habitat, this is understory. 148 native trees for roadworks that have been described by some as solving one problem but just creating a whole pile of others. And in recent times, there's been an announcement that there'll be a review of roadworks around the corridor that you mentioned. So my question is, what form of independence, transparency and community engagement will be part of the review? And importantly, what level of tree destruction, i.e. how many trees, do you consider is justified for any roadworks on Old Balear Road and James Road?
Look, a really good question. Thank you, John, and thank you for your passion and the other friends of Old Balear Road. I've got to be honest with you, having come to this at such a late stage in the project, I consider it a minor miracle that I was actually even able to achieve that review, because we know that on the previous work schedule, work was going to start in February. And I said, under no circumstances until I have had the opportunity, and potentially as a local MP, to look into this further, will you touch a single tree? That was my view on it. Now, we have this review. It is looking at the staging of works, and because a lot of people in the community have said, if you look at Balear Triangle, and I think Sam said this, and Heather's, well, the council at least has said this as well, if you look at the Balear Triangle and see if you do that first, that may change the nature or the need for an infrastructure treatment at that intersection. That's what I'll be looking at. Look, I'm not the Department for Infrastructure and Transport. I have dealt with them. I've dealt with the Minister's Office as much as I humanly can over this period in order to get that and to get the planning money for Laffers Road. Those detailed questions will need to go to the department, but I can assure you that if I'm successful as your local MP, there would be no part of that review or the process by which it's undertaken that I would not scrutinise heavily. I have experience looking at infrastructure projects. I have experience asking the departmental folks the right questions and the hard questions, because they often won't put it up front, the things they don't want to tell you, of course. And I'll be going over it very intently to make sure all the projects along the corridor are the right fit for the problems that we're trying to solve, very attuned to matters of ecology. I've worked on grey box preservation projects before. It's also, of course, habitat for the southern brown bandicoot, which is also endangered, and I understand how important it is.
Thank you, John. I thought this might come up tonight. It's interesting on the doors, there's a mixed vibe about the roundabout, but in general, most people can't quite understand where it came from. But in December, a whole lot of community members came to me and said, we're really worried about the habitat destruction, but also the impact to our cyclists and whether or not it was going to make things even safer. And another community member said to me the other day, which is a little bit echoing what you said, John, is to solve one problem, we're going to create 10. And I think that's definitely going to be one of the cases. So in December, I went to our in fact our Environment Minister, and begged for a position on it because I knew that it was important to our community. So we announced in December that the Labor government would put the project on hold for Infrastructure SA to undertake the following analysis. Are currently planned traffic treatments like the Triangle likely to ease the pressure and create those gaps? Are there other traffic treatments that might be more effective other than the roundabout and reducing the risks at James Road and Old Balear Road intersection? Is the roundabout proposal justified in risk mitigation, expenditure and impact? And what is the full environmental impact of the proposed roundabout? It was really important to me that we had that outcome, because no trees really would be a really great outcome, because grey box are endangered, and I've been down there, and there's also not just the trees, there's a whole lot of native scrub and grasses and etc. And they're homes for a lot of animals, and I think we really need to have a look at the whole project and the whole corridor before we jump on put a band-aid halfway down Old Balear Road.
I can see the cues. I would, like most people up here, I would say absolutely no way, at the very least until we know for sure that it's actually going to help, that it's not going to already be fixed by all the other things. And even if we did need something there, I would not be supporting something that killed that many native trees and that much native habitat. On top of that, I would then start looking at how did this get to the point where we were told that everyone in the community, that the majority of the community was in support when it wasn't. How did we get to the point where this sort of felt like it was sort of moved in without the transparency that we need? So yeah, those are the two things I'd be looking at.
I think most things have been said, but once again, we need to understand the problem before we generate a solution, and I think that's what the issue is with this roundabout, is no one's quite sure what the problem is that we're trying to solve. So I believe that we're all screaming in unison, at least 4 out of 5 of us, saying that we need to suspend works at the roundabout site until we see the outcome of the Balear Triangle works.
Thanks for the question, John. James Road is very problematic for those who use it, especially those who live on that part of Balear. In terms of the native veg process, that's actually been in train for now quite a while. I think that application was made some time ago, late last year. But more importantly, I myself met with Minister Wingard and John Whelan, who's the guru of all projects in the department, and expressed my view as well that the James Road roundabout should not proceed until Balear Triangle is completed and we look at the Laffers Road issue. And I was going back through some correspondence this week, and I wrote to then Minister Mulligan back in 2015 on Laffers Road, and the money that's coming from the planning study of course comes from that $40 million bucket that was allocated now some several years ago in the state budget. So I think where the department is listening, which is fantastic. I remember telling Minister Wingard, if we don't get this right, he'll have another community protest like we had at the Waite Gatehouse happening further up the corridor. So, but we do need to really look at the whole corridor, from the way people commute from Aberfoyle Park, Flagstaff Hill, coming through Main Road, Coromandel Valley, right all the way to the city, where there's Cross Road, Fullerton Road, Unley Road, Goodwood Road, Marion Road. We really need to map southern suburb commuters so we can get the right infrastructure upgrades where needed across all our metropolitan suburban roads.
Thank you. We technically are out of time. You need another forum like this one. This is amazing. But I'm going to allow 2 more quick questions, as long as they're quick questions and quick answers.
Thank you, Elaine Butler, formerly Balear and Glenalta. My question is a general question to all the candidates. I believe that being elected as a politician is both a privilege and also a responsibility in the way that you represent your electorate. My question is about integrity and accountability as a local member in a state parliament. How will you ensure that your representation and conduct are informed by integrity and accountability to better both your electorate and our state, and to restore trust in politicians and politics? Thank you.
I might jump on this one first. This is something I've spent a little bit of time thinking about. I would start a print newspaper for those that print newsletter for those that want that, and a web page for those that prefer that, explaining what I voted for at every single vote, why I voted for it, and welcoming discussion from anyone who wishes to discuss it as to why that might have been a good or bad idea. If I get elected to serve the people in this room and the rest of the people of Waite, I will not be working for anyone other than the people in this room and the other people of Waite. You are the people who pay my wages, you are the people I work for. I am responsible to you.
Thanks, Elaine. I agree that representing the community is a huge responsibility, and I think that the integrity and accountability at the moment is problematic. I think the core issue is actually campaign donations. While we continue to have big business donating to politicians, the decisions can't be made without bias. So the largest campaign donation I have had is $500 from my son. I haven't taken any donations from big business, and so I would always be able to act with integrity because I have only one thing at heart, and that is the best outcomes for my community.
Thank you, Elaine. I've had the great privilege, and I was working this out today, of being the member for this community for 2,587 days. And every single morning I've woken up, gone to work and done my very best for the community. I haven't always been perfect, and I've made mistakes, but I've reflected on those, and I continue with the same passion as I did on the first day that I got elected, to be your rep, to do the very best that I can, to be accessible, to be as honest with you, to be available, and to put the interests of our community, whether it's Coromandel Valley or Mitcham and everything in between, at the forefront of what I do, what my office does, and how that's reflected in my votes in Parliament.
Well, thank you, Elaine. It's a really important question. Look, for me personally, I'm someone who genuinely wears my heart on my sleeve. I think honesty is really important because, look, I may not agree with you and you may not agree with me, but the important thing is that I listen to you and I'm able to defend my position, because I think if an elected member cannot defend the views that they hold, then they need to seriously consider holding different views. So I'll always be upfront with you, even if I disagree with you. That's a key part of accountability and integrity. The flip side as well is it just comes back to accessibility. As we said before, making sure you keep in touch with the community every single day, that you're across all of the issues, that you understand who in the community a policy will benefit and who it won't, and so you can make up your mind accordingly. It's worth remembering every vote inside the Liberal Party in Parliament is a conscience vote. We're not bound by dogmatic rules of other major parties. Every vote is a conscience vote, and we've seen some people cross the floor this year. It's an important distinction.
I think it's really important that we have people in Parliament who have had real life experience, because they're definitely likely to be more in touch with their community. In terms of integrity and how you can trust the Labor Party, we've moved already to commit to banning all political donations, so from businesses, from individuals, from unions and from other organisations. So already we're on the front foot, because we do understand that there is some doubt in the community in terms of trust. Having lived in this electorate my whole life, it's so important to me, and most of my family lives here, so let me tell you, if I do something that's wrong, they're going to let me know about it. But for you guys, I think it's the whole reason why I'm running. I was frustrated too. I was seeing decisions being made that I didn't agree with, and so I put my hand up to run so I can get a seat at the table.
One final question. Quick,
Thanks
please.
for taking it. My name's Tim. I live in Balear. My question is for each candidate. What is your personal opinion on the necessity of the current state of emergency regarding COVID, vaccine passports and mask mandates? And for those candidates who are members of a political party, what is your party's policy on the same questions?
Anyone wants to take this question?
Look, we've had a somewhat similar question before, and I have very little to say that I haven't already said. Of course, everyone needs the right to autonomy over their own bodies, but we also need to take care of the people who need to be protected.
Thanks for the question, Tim. Parliament resumes on the 3rd of May this year, and I can't wait to go back. But one of the things that we need to do is to go back and revisit the Emergency Management Act. It came in 2004 on the back of the Black Saturday bushfires, and it was really designed to deal with floods that, as we're seeing in Queensland and New South Wales at the moment. It wasn't designed to deal with the pandemic situation that we have. So I think it is time for a review. And of course taking expert evidence advice which is needed, but definitely it's time to have a review of the Emergency Management Act in its entirety, and also how it deals with pandemics without a shadow of a doubt.
Thanks, Tim. We've never had well, not in my lifetime, in most people's lifetime, we haven't had a pandemic before. So in terms of having the state of emergency when we needed it, I think it was the right decision. I think that Grant Stevens and even Nicholas Brewery have done an amazing job at keeping South Australians safe. I think we've done better out of the pandemic than a lot of our other states. In terms of vaccine passports, I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not exactly sure. And I think I answered the mandate question already.
I'd refer to my previous answer on the principles that I, as a Liberal, balance, and that I think after, as we learn to live with COVID, it is in the community, we are managing with it. That will rebalance naturally, and if it doesn't balance naturally, then I think it's up to members of Parliament to ensure that it does. I do think in the new Parliament there will be comprehensive work done on what a new Emergency Management Act might look like. Look, I personally have been quite comfortable with the Police Commissioner acting on the advice of the Chief Public Health Officer. I will always take heed of the public health advice, and on mask mandates, I think, again, as we learn to live with COVID, masks should naturally dissipate. But of course, if I was on public transport and someone was next to me and they sneezed, I'd rather they did it with a mask on.
Why not? I think that COVID is now for us 2 years old, and we're just all getting tired. And to start with, we pulled together beautifully as a community, and it was like we were facing a common foe. And as this thing has dragged on, it's made us antsy because we've been anxious for so long. I think that we do have to follow the public health advice, but I also think that we are going to move forward to a place where individual responsibility will increase. And so I think that we will move to a point where it's the responsibility of the person, for example, to decide whether or not they want to wear a mask for their protection. So we are all tired, and I hope that we move through this rather quickly, but we don't know, as well, we don't know what's coming next, but I can guarantee there'll be another wave of COVID. So I'm not sure that we should make huge decisions just yet.
Thank you. Sorry, sir. I'm afraid I have to bring the Q&A to a close at this point. We're already past the time that we'd agreed. But remember that once we conclude the forum, you're welcome to talk individually to the candidates until around 9:30. And now, finally, all 5 candidates have 1 minute for a closing statement. The order has been decided by a draw that took place earlier. The order of statements, just to remind you, will be Brendan, Alexander, Sam, Katherine, and Heather. So, first of all, Brendan.
Hi. I don't plan on taking the full minute because I really don't want to say much more than everyone in this room will never be more powerful in terms of how you can affect the way the country's run, than when you go to the election booth. I will simply ask you, please, look at the people that are running, look at their history, look at their party's history, whether the party requires them to vote the way that their party says that they should, or whether they simply encourage it and take note when you don't. most people will vote along the lines of what their party says most of the times. Please look at what the parties say they will do, and then look at what they've actually done. Decide for yourself who's best. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to be measured by that, Brendan, because this government has done a fantastic job over the past 2 years in the shadow of a 1 in 100 year pandemic. Who would have thought that South Australia would have the fastest growing economy in the nation? I grew up in a small business family, as I said, in the shadow of Paul Keating's recession and the state bank collapse. And it was tough. And I feel positive because I think for the first time since then, we've actually shaken off that black cloud that's been over us. People are moving back here. My contemporaries who moved away to the eastern states are now coming back, which is fantastic. I'm sure many ex-South Australians that are your children are coming back as well and bringing their families with them. It's a really exciting time to be in South Australia. We need to keep on the path that we're on. We need to have a strong, stable government in order to get us there. You do have a choice. It's a really, really important choice. Your vote could decide the outcome of this election. Majority government is the most stable form of government. It's what the Westminster system is built off of. And I humbly ask your support for me personally, but also to re-elect the Marshall Liberal government.
Good try.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thanks all for coming. We all know what we've done over the last couple of years and have achieved in this community. But more importantly, politics is also about policy. And I like to think that I'm coming before you with a detailed policy suite of initiatives that I want to champion for our community and for South Australia, whether it's Freight on Cross Road, whether it's investing in our local health services and bringing back health to the community, whether it's protection of the environment, open space and heritage, really big passion issues for me and so many of you, or whether it's continuing around tax reform. COVID has taken away a debate in society about tax reform, on balancing budgets, on deficit management. We haven't seen that from either government. At some point, money won't be cheap anymore, and we're going to have a huge state debt that needs to be funded. So do we need to look at initiatives like debt ceiling? Working with government to ensure that we have the best outcome is my commitment to you as your independent, and to continue to be that strong voice for Waite as I have been. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming along tonight. It's an awesome turnout, and I think it's a really great opportunity to know more about your candidates and about the parties that you've got a choice. In Waite, for the first time in a really long time, there is a choice to make. It's been a Conservative seat for a very long time, and we have worked out that that doesn't get us what we need. My ask of you is to make Waite marginal so that we can get investment from either side of the party depending on who gets in. Labor has amazing plans for the future, not just the next 4 years, but for the next 40 years. Record investment in health and in education and everything you can imagine. I encourage you to have a look at our policies on petermalinauskas.com.au, but it's so important to me that we have a local representing our electorate, because I've been here my whole life. I know what the issues are, and I feel like I'm completely approachable, and that if you put your trust in me, I will only do the best for you.
So I'd firstly like to thank the organisers for this fantastic event, and to my fellow candidates for such a respectful debate. I'd like to thank my team out there of terrific volunteers, because I wouldn't have got this far without you. I'd like to close by talking about preferences. As I've said, I'm not affiliated with any party, and I'm not telling my supporters who they should vote for as a preferred candidate. A voting ticket is exactly that. It's a candidate telling the voter who else to vote for. But you can make up your own mind. You don't need to follow a how to vote card. I'm standing on an open ticket, which means that I'm leaving it up to the voters to choose who they would like to represent them if it's not me. This means I've not made any deals or behind the scenes promises. Preferences are yours, not mine. You should vote from number 1 to number 6 in the order of who you want to represent you. Every vote and preference will matter in this election, so I ask you to choose very wisely. Thank you so much.
Well, this brings us to the end of this formal event, this amazing event, I have to say. But before we conclude, can we please thank the 5 candidates for their participation tonight? And I would also like to thank you all for your participation in this event. And from me, thank you and good night.
And thank you, Benito.
Much smaller. I think it was just this room. It was packed. It was very hostile. Yes. The SA Best guy was very